Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Tuesday night show. Um, we're getting some things sorted here now. Our topic tonight is basically what's happening at the front lines. What are our caregivers experiencing? I don't know about you, but I seem to be getting a different message every hour, and the reality seems to be all over the map. There's all kinds of talk about hospitals that are beyond capacity and all kinds of talk about hospitals that are completely empty with people, medical staff sitting around watching movies. So we've been getting some reports, though. Some of the bigger cities in Canada, Montreal and Toronto in particular, are starting to see a pretty acute build in terms of the volume of cases they're serving and in terms of the volume of people that are passing on from this COVID-19 blight. So it's really quite something. CBC did an interview with funeral directors in Vancouver, Toronto, and in Montreal. My family's firm here in BC was interviewed. My nephew Ryan Crean was interviewed, and he spoke quite articulately about the situation they're facing. He mentioned that part of the challenge they have is that the healthcare equipment that they need to try to keep their staff as safe as possible is getting usurped by hospitals. So there seems to be some pressure on the supply lines, but overall they're managing to cope with the volume here. That's not the same experience of my friend Bridget Federley in Montreal. They had tried to double shift their staff to just kind of maintain a greater presence over more hours, but they found the day shift was just too taxed, and they pretty much had to have everybody on deck all day. So Montreal is certainly seeing an increase in the number of cases. Also, some of the hospitals are starting to put in certain protocols where they're kind of meeting the funeral staff at the door, where they're better able to control the interior environment in the hospitals. So it's kind of a wait and see. Every day the situation goes a little bit of a different direction, and it so far seems to be just about impossible to predict. But clearly, other than New York, we're not seeing the kind of wholesale slaughter really that have plagued um, Italy and Spain. You know, some of the mass graves they're digging in Spain can be seen from satellites in outer space. Um, so in North America, as I said, with the exception of New York, we seem to be spared that kind of huge volume. So that's kind of what things seem to be like on the funeral front. But I've talked before in our stream about the kind of culture that I grew up with in funeral service, where really what we were trying to do is to help people who were pretty daunted by the whole prospect of their mortality, try to help them as healthily as possible to confront the reality of a loss. And in so doing, basically what we were trying to do was to sort of maximize the number of options. It's like everybody has their own needs when they go through a loss, and there's no way to standardize that. And certain faith traditions aside, it's not even that easy to foretell what the needs of the family are going to be. I remember we brought Dr. Alan Wofelt up to Vancouver. This might have been the first time we brought him up back in the 90s. And we did a 2-day workshop with various groups from the community. And the healthcare workers workshop that we did, there was a nurse there who said, Dr. Wofelt, there are times when people tell us they absolutely need to see the body. By the way, I come from the city of Vancouver, which has the highest cremation rate in all of North America. I think the city itself is 90%, and the province is I think 85% statistically. And so there in the 90s there was this basically supposition that viewing the deceased was obsolete. There was no need for that anymore. And so this nurse was telling Dr. Wolfelt how surprising it was that people would be in that situation. And Dr. Wolfelt said, well, basically, we've been spending time with our deceased loved ones ever since we lived in caves, or at least that's how long we've been writing it down. And he said, when it comes to a situation of loss, people have a choice. They can either pay the funeral director now to confront their loss, or they can skip it and just pay me for the rest of their life. Going through a loss is a pretty fundamental adjustment, and it can take an enormous toll on us. And really, all we're doing going through bereavement is we're learning to live with that loss, because all of a sudden our life is an entirely new reality. So while we're learning to live with that loss, I lost somebody who was pretty precious to me back in 1975. My Uncle Frank just dropped dead out of the blue at 52 years old. And I mean, I loved him a great deal. And so I was moping around and I was so depressed. And a friend of mine one day took me aside. He said, Tom, you're so bummed out about losing your Uncle Frank. If you had a choice between having him and losing him, or never having had him at all, what would you have chose? And I tell you, that absolutely floored me. And it recontextualized the loss too, because I started to realize, wow, how much more blessed my life was having this great influence and this great inspiration in this man. So loss is very complex, and we need to confront it. So how does that relate to the COVID-19 pandemic? All of a sudden, we're in a situation where we can't even say goodbye to a loved one. To be, we're not allowed to be in the presence of a loved one. And so we're getting reports now from all around the world where people are saying goodbye to a mother or goodbye to their father on a cell phone, on FaceTime. It's really, really quite a remarkable experience. But Marshall McLuhan told us that the more wired we became, the more we would miss our physical presence. The more wired we became, the more discarnate we became. We'd long for that physical presence. In fact, he said back, I think, in the 50s that if we continued to become more dispossessed, more electronically minded, eventually we'd evolve into a generation of pornographers. I mean, that he could have said that 60, 70 years ago just completely blows my mind. But when we're discarnate, we are physically transported somewhere else. A portion of us is. So if that's all we've got in order to be with a loved one when they're departing, to be honest, we need to seize that. Bereavement is not a journey to take alone. It's really something that we need to be able to participate in and adjust to as completely as possible. And we shouldn't grieve alone either. There are counseling services, for different types of loss. There's victims of homicide. There's the bereavement helpline. There's Safer for victims of suicide. And sometimes, it's actually a great asset to be able to talk to a stranger about these types of loss. So it's really something that we need to think about and to be prepared for. Another thing too is what about our family, our friends, our loved ones who are in the front line of care? I have a daughter-in-law who works at Surrey Memorial Hospital, and she's talking about what the reality is like there, and we need to be caring for our caregivers as well. It's vital that we keep them as strong as possible because they need to have that much extra energy to support our fellow citizens who are plagued by this disease. Wow. Um, so another issue that we've been really having to confront since the 90s is this whole idea of people who reach a pain and suffering level that's beyond what they feel they can tolerate. Should they have the right to end a life? And that's the whole euthanasia question. And from my point of view, working in funeral service, it's not an isolated situation when I've had people asking me whether their perfectly healthy relative who happened to be, over 70 and went into a hospital and all of a sudden had this downturn. There are people wondering whether euthanasia's been being practiced unofficially for a while now. So when we're thinking about our mortality and stuff, there's the question, of, when should life be ended? So I've shared with you on my streams a few times that what I've tried to do when I've got questions that are a little bit beyond me, as I try to put together some music that can sort of help me discuss that. And to me, the idea of legalizing murder, I find that absolutely terrifying. I mean, what does it mean? Like, how much wealth in this world today is in the hands of baby boomers? And, to me, a big challenge that our youth face today is that they've got so many feeds and so many platforms of data that there's this sense that they've already been everywhere and done everything. Because since they've watched it being done, there's an illusion that they've actually done it. So to confront this reality, I put together a song that I'd like to share with you now. There are some of my healthcare associates who don't enjoy this song very much because one of the things I'm pointing out is that at least in Israel, when the doctors went on strike, the death rate plummeted. The funeral directors actually went on strike. So I'm going to get my techie Kevin, my producer Kevin, to roll the euthanasia, the suicide shuffle.
Best friends for life, but a funeral director. Joey knew Dad was proud of his DNR. His Uncle Bill said, Joey, just a touch more morphine, and Dad'll be peaceful sleeping with the stars. Joey asked me, does this happen often? We see it more and more these days, my friend. The advocates all still get persecuted, but it's probably the world's fastest growing trend. Yeah, it's probably the world's fastest growing trend. Fact is, in year 2000 back in Israel, all the doctors, they went out on strike. Felt that none of them was rightly earning anywhere near what they thought say soon as the doctors, they all went out on strike, the death rate fell 33%. Yeah, that death rate fell by 33%. Who could think of any kind of reason to expedite our loved ones' dispatch? Well, there's always skyrocketing healthcare costs. Who could count all those trillions in cash? And then, of course, there's the matter of our inheritance. Another humongous mountain to scratch. So really isn't making murder legal just a communal suicide pact? No one believed the silly funeral directors. How could such an absurd claim be true? Had anyone who counted noticed, the entire system shoulda, woulda come unglued. Funeral guys said it didn't happen often. Most times the death rate stayed flat and true. Fact is, the death rate hadn't fallen like that since the doctor's last strike in 1982. Yeah, the doctor's last strike in 1982. Who could think of any kind of reason to expedite our loved ones' dispatch? Well, there's always skyrocketing healthcare costs. Who could count all those trillions in cash? And then there's the matter of our inheritance. Another humongous mountain to scratch. So really isn't making murder legal just a communal suicide pact? Here, drink your Kool-Aid. Illness can be a mercurial burden, but health's corporatization's now our number one killer. Legalizing murder makes palliative talk topical, takes end-of-life care much farther upriver. It's not hard to make folks feel useless, but what if we changed our entire goal? The wish for suicide nearly vanishes when proper palliative can manage our souls. Need proper palliative to manage our souls. Fact is, to start this vital job of caring with respect for each other's souls, gotta first confront our own mortality, declare our own healthcare and legal goals. Our healthcare systems and legal systems were both paralyzed 10 years ago. Terry Schiavo's entire family were victims of voyeuristic world stocks. Folks who just don't know. See, not knowing was actually the thing. It dragged all our cords into the ring. So write your advanced care plan today and let me hear you sing. Who could think of any kind of reason to expedite our loved ones' dispatch? Well, there's always skyrocketing healthcare costs. Who could count all those trillions in cash? Then there's the matter of our inheritance. Another humongous mountain to scratch. So really isn't making murder legal just a communal suicide pact?
Yeah. So I was a little bit, it's a little bit of monkey business with that song because, of course, the real reason that the death rate fell 33% during the doctors' strike, both in 1982 and in the year 2000, of course, is because all of the procedures were canceled. So the people that would have unsuccessful operations were not, those operations weren't happening at all. Um, but at the same time, healthcare is a system where we've got to be making trades and balances all of the time. And so just to me, the challenge with euthanasia is, does it really have to visit people who've taken an oath of care? There's no skull and crossbones on the doctor's mantle. It's a snake wrapped around um, a column, and it's supposed to resemble the freeing of our people from these previous plagues and diseases. To the best of my knowledge, in our province in British Columbia here, there is not one palliative doctor that is participating in the what we call MAID, the medical assistance in dying. But our healthcare, following the laws of Canada, healthcare is requiring it that it be practiced. And that's resulting in some pretty tough challenges for certain organizations out there. I've mentioned before that I'm the president of the Surrey Hospice Society, and we're all about life. We're all about squeezing every drop of life out of the time that's left to our patients and to the people we're helping facing end of life. And we're also helping the survivors cope with the loss afterwards. But to have an organization that's completely focused on life be in a position where it needs to help people end life it's a dilemma. It's a very tough question. And a good friend of mine actually was probably the most articulate palliative doctor opposing aid when the laws started to be changed. And yet he found himself in a very difficult situation where a relative of his asked him for that exact help, and he had refused at the outset because he felt that it was not responsible. But then he learned that the care facility that she was in was basically, allowing her to starve to death. And she asked this doctor how that could be more merciful than him ending her pain. I guess for me, though, the question is it a doctor that has to end her pain? I asked Google how to die, painlessly, and I got 800,000 answers in 0.47 seconds. Maybe that's a new ministry that's needed, and not doctors. Just wondering if you folks out there have got any ideas on this. So far, all my chats have been related to my technical problems, which is not uncommon because we're still still spent 2 months trying to save the world with a potato, and we've ordered some more gear, and we keep asking them for a delivery date, and they can't even give us that. So obviously, we're just part of the entire world lineup for new gear. So we'll keep struggling along here with our potato, but and sorry for any of those technical challenges we're facing. We are hoping to get much more in line with the current age and current equipment when our new gear arrives. So having no chat pertaining to our subject then today, I'm just wondering, Producer Geek, Kevin, do we have our latest song? Is that something I can share with everybody today? This is a song, yeah, beautiful. This is a song that it's the first song that I wrote. And I'm just not sure whether it's been downloaded. Oh, it's there. Okay, so let's roll. This is The first song I wrote, there was this girl in high school. I was in an all-boys school, but we shared our science classes with the all-girls school down the road, and one of the girls that used to come into the class had me just completely smitten. And she was a great gal. And when I lost my uncle, she actually was one of my caregivers, which was became pretty important to me. I sadly became quite overcome by that loss, and so I think I became a little bit scary in my depression, but that certainly wasn't her fault, and she was a wonderful friend. So this was my tribute to her. This is called, this is Pam's song. It's called Beautiful.
When my day is going slow and I'm counting the minutes left to go, see the glint of your golden hair like a sunrise over Monte Carlo. Well, you walk up to me and you say hi, while the others, they just walk on by. It's just so hard to study chemistry when you're sitting right in front of me. You're so beautiful. Ooh, you're so beautiful. You got a smile all the guys are crying for, a smile that I could die for. You're beautiful. Ooh. When you are here, I'm just spellbound. The teacher breaks my trance, he comes around. Daddy is a pilot, you should get around. London, Rome, or just downtown. Whether driving around in your Volkswagen or taking them unmarked tours all over the world, you're so beautiful. Ooh, you're so beautiful. Got a smile all the guys are crying for, a smile that I could die for. You're beautiful. Ooh. So beautiful.
Yeah. All right. So there's the first song that I wrote, and we're just going to roll some of our commercial for some of our merch, and so you might want to take home a Tommy C and the Tombstones mug, and we'll be seeing you then on Thursday at 5 o'clock. Thanks for joining us, and we'll have that audio challenge managed by then, I'm sure. So in the meantime, have a great but isolated week. Thanks very much. Well, when Wall Street first invaded the boneyard, voodoo economics